Welcome back to the Q&A session on why doing a PhD in computer science in Germany. This session will be on the prerequisites. Many of the questions that you sent in were concerned with either, like, let's call it personal prerequisites, questions like am I the right person to proceed with trying to do a PhD or not? And then also there were many questions concerning the question, are there something like formal constraints or formal prerequisites? Do I have to, I don't know, hit a certain threshold of grades to be allowed for a PhD? So I think it's a nice idea maybe to keep that a little bit split. So talk about these two aspects, personal prerequisites and formal prerequisites. Let's start with questions about the personal prerequisites. Florian, what do you think? What is the, like, how should a person personally be? What kind of person should someone be who is thinking about starting a PhD? What's the main character point that this person should have?
So I think the most important point of doing a PhD or the character you need to be for doing a PhD is that you are able to work on your own. Because by doing a PhD, it's not like that you get a list of tasks you have to do and just find solutions for problems which you get. You have to do two things. You have to find the problems and you have to provide solutions for the problem. And then after you have solved these two things, you have to be able to formulate the solutions by writing, for example, a paper or something like that. And that is, I mean, we are working most of the time on yourself, so alone. You have a lot of colleagues you can talk to, but you should be able to be able to work alone on topics, find solutions, and stay motivated. That is very important, because I had in the beginning of my PhD, I was working on a topic. It was an extension of my master thesis, some algorithms in simulations, and I had there a problem, and I stick into that and spent a lot of time there, and it was very frustrating. And I just thought, okay, then I have to just spend more time, and that was the wrong way, because the deeper I looked into that, the more I forgot what the original problem was. And there you have to be able to also step back and look from a farther distance on the problem, that you may be working with wrong tools into the wrong direction. So that is what you have to be as a character, to be self-motivated and be able to work on your own. Because as Professor Karl already said, it's not a supervisor giving you tasks, it's an advisor. So the advisor leads you, but you have, I mean, it's like doing a PhD is like being a student with a small difference. There is no teacher teaching you the stuff. The teacher is yourself. You are teaching yourself all the techniques and so the techniques and methodologies to be able to solve research problems, which you also have to find yourself.
Okay, that sounds interesting. But when I hear that, I have to say that, I don't know, I'd be a little bit afraid that, would you say working on yourself, that means, does that also mean you are basically a lone ranger, someone who is like all on his own throughout the entire path? Because you pointed it out so much, you put so much emphasis on this, you have to work on your own. So are you lonely,
definitely.
Or?
No, definitely not. But you have your topic, and you have colleagues you can talk to that. But there is nobody which tells you, well, look here, and if you combine it with that, sure, you have your advisor in a group. You maybe have a postdoc which helps you. But in the end, it's your task to solve everything. It's your task to put everything in the right direction. Because otherwise it wouldn't be a PhD. It would just be some engineering task. Sorry to say that, so, but that's the difference between doing engineering, just solving problems which you have on a list, and doing research. So extending knowledge.
Okay, so it's more about this aspect of freedom and filling that freedom with something that you would like to find out. Okay,
and,
cool.
and that is something you have to think about, because in the first year I had this problem, and it was very frustrating because I didn't get forward because I had these problems, and I looked very deeply into that, and I thought, okay, I'm completely wrong here. I'm not able to solve anything of that, and then I had to step back and look from a different perspective on the problem, and it's a learning process. So people should not get demotivated by having these problems in the beginning. It's a learning process, personally and technically.
Okay.
The things you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I saw a lot of nodding and maybe also skeptical views on that. So maybe let's open this question for the round. So would you agree with Florian, or would you like to add something, or maybe say that's not true? So what is, again, the question was like, what is like the we're talking about something very untangible here, like the personal prerequisites of who should I be, or who do I have to be to proceed PhD?
The job is probably not a 9-to-5 job. So saying I start every day at 9 and I have a break of half an hour and at lunchtime, and then I leave office at 5 o'clock is something which might not be the case for every day. And also in terms of money, I mean, it is probably the worst decision to start a PhD if you want to get rich or so. So there are much better options in industry. But also this level of frustration somehow, that was also something Florian mentioned, is something very important. So there will be points in time where you do something and you do something wrong, or you fail a certain task, and you lost a lot of time, and then you have to do that again, and maybe even once more afterwards. So this takes a lot of time, and that might be a bit frustrating after several tries. But on the other side, there will be hopefully this point where you get to an answer and you finish a certain task and you produce some kind of new knowledge you can publish on a conference or in a journal, which is actually a very cool thing if that happens.
So a eureka moment.
Yes, more or less. But the way to reach that point, that is sometimes frustrating, and this is something you have to consider. And I haven't expected that, or I haven't faced this issue in the industry, for example.
I see.
I think that sounds very, that sounds terrible, right? It's all frustrating and it's all dark and you're alone. And my God, after this video, who is going to the mission failed, right? But there's certainly truth to that, right? You need to be able to deal with delayed gratification. So you produce a result and then you submit a paper, and then it takes 6 months until you get a verdict, and then it might be negative, and then you have to resubmit. Sure, that's true. But there's also this, you called it a eureka moment, this cool thing. Hey, I found something out that nobody else knew before me. That is so cool. That can be so gratifying, and that can be so... When this happens the first time to a PhD student, they walk 10 centimeters above the ground for like a week or so, right? This is such, it's all fun and nice to see when this happens to somebody. There's this, don't underestimate that, right? It's not a PhD day in the life, as we talked about later, is not about every day being patted on the back. Yes, good job, you implemented another half page of code. That's not how this works, right? So delayed gratification is certainly something you need to deal with. You need grit, you need endurance to do that. You need intelligence, you need to be self-motivated. This is all true. And I was missing one more thing in all this discussion here. You need self-assurance to stand up for what you know is right. right? You need to convince your colleagues, your advisor, no, what you're doing is wrong. This is not the right way. What I'm doing is the right way, right? I usually tell my PhD students sort of on the first day of work, I'm paying you to disagree with me. I'm paying you to prove me wrong, right? If I already know everything that you know, I don't need to pay you. I keep the money for myself, right? And that's something that people need to get used to, right? So this, hey, I need to tell the boss he's wrong. Yeah, not everybody can do that on the first day of the job, right? So it takes some learning there. But this is something you absolutely need to be able to do, to stand up for what you know is right and what you have backed up with arguments, right?
Okay, that sounds like maybe a good conclusion for this rather vague area of personal prerequisites. So maybe we could now skip to the more formal questions. So let me skip over the questions. So one that pops up very, like, I think 3 or 4 people asked that question. What grade point is expected from us to be considered for a PhD position? So do I need a 1.3, a 1.7, or is 2.7 enough if I'm good at that particular topic that I'm interested in? So how maybe Professor Karl, how do you personally handle that? I think
so the formal answer is very simple. You need a master degree, or you need to be about to complete your master degree. You will not be employed without the degree. But there is no formal rule that you have to have a certain minimum grade point average. That simply doesn't exist, right? Practically, what happens, I repeat myself, it depends on your advisor. Some people carefully look at your grades, some people couldn't care less, right? Some people will carefully check what grade they give in the master thesis, in particular if it's done in the own group. And let's be honest, if I have a master student here and I have to grade the thesis with a 2 dot something or 3 dot something, chances that I employ that person to do a PhD are 0, right? That will not happen. The grade somebody has in some weird, for me, irrelevant topic in something, I don't really care so much. Nonetheless, personally, I believe grades are actually a good predictor of success. So there is some importance to grade, and I guess most of my colleagues would agree there is some importance to grade, but it's by no means the only metric. There is no guaranteed statement. The flip side of that argument is there's no guaranteed statement that if you have a GPA of 1 point something, you are admitted. That's not how it works, right?
Okay.
You are negotiating for an employment, right? And that's how this works. You need to convince somebody to employ you.
Yeah. So what are different metrics? You just said it's by not the only one. So can you, I don't know, name a few more?
Grades. It's very telling and very informative to read a master thesis, right? Is this carefully argued? Can I understand the problem description? Does it make sense how the problem is attacked? Do the methods make sense? Is that all plausible, right? Is this well laid out? Can I understand the writing? Very important. Half of your job is going to be writing text, English text, not code, text.
That was also one of the questions that somebody asked. I'm not that, I don't like to write that much. Would it be a good idea to do a PhD? So maybe you would recommend that person, maybe not, or?
That's a bad idea.
Okay.
That's a bad idea. If you don't like writing text, I think I would carefully reconsider whether I really want to do a PhD. This is a large part of your job at the end, and it's important. It's very important. I've seen so many papers rejected with good ideas because of terrible writing, and the reader simply doesn't understand what this is all about, and off it goes. So that's important. Can somebody write? Generic intelligence and talking to people. It's a job interview, right? You have basically at the end, you have a job interview, and then you'd have to convince the other guy on the other side of the table that you deserve that amount of money. And it's lots of money that we invest in a PhD student there, right? And that's how this works.
Okay, so maybe a little bit more specific question. I mean, I know that at Paderborn University, we also have students from the fields of like electrical engineering, for example. And there was one specific question: if someone from an electrical engineering background could also apply for a PhD in computer science, is that something you would consider? I mean, at the end you're doing networks, so that has some, I don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is always a question that comes up, and it's actually hotly debated also among professors.
Okay.
There's no uniform opinion there. Formally, the answer is yes, you can. So the regulation says you can be admitted or you can get a degree later on if you have a CS degree, CE, or a related degree. And what is related? Math, is that related? Depends which part of math. Physics, is that still related? Probably not. And then it becomes a question of interpretation. And sometimes it could be that if it's sort of electrical engineering, but sort of a non-IT related part of EE, then you might have to take, that's one of the rare cases where you do have to take classes, right? Then you have to take some makeup classes in, I don't know, software engineering or so. But that is then an individual decision. And if you're unsure about that, again, talk to your advisor or talk to the head of the PhD examination board, who would then go through that. So if that is an issue, if you don't have a CS master degree or computer engineering master degree, that might make sense and is probably a good idea to check beforehand.
Okay, so I think that were the main questions that were in this. Yeah.
I'd like to add one more thing because I also saw that in the question. German is not a requirement.
True.
You do have to speak English. Working language in most groups is English, and in science it's English anyway, until it becomes Chinese, but so far it's still English. German helps in everyday conversation and to going to lunch break, etc., but there's no formal requirement that you need to speak German.
Okay, that's good to know, I guess, for the internationals who might not be familiar with German. So good. Okay, so that was this session about the prerequisites, the formal and the personal ones for pursuing a PhD.